Fallout 76 just got a massive development update. It was just revealed that Fallout 76 is in fact getting another developer. Since launch, Bethesda Game Studios has been the sole and primary dev on the project, with different things being done by its various studios, but most of the development being done by Bethesda Game Studios Austin. But just yesterday, it was revealed that Double 11, the developer behind Goat Simulator, will in fact be working on Fallout 76 from here on out. And okay, despite that statement being technically true, it is somewhat misleading. Double 11 did work on Goat Simulator for a while, but more recently they are responsible for the console version of Rust as well as Minecraft Dungeons. But the big question here is, what is going on? Is Bethesda abandoning Fallout 76, and is this new studio going to be responsible for its future content updates? Does this mean more or less content coming to Fallout 76 in the future? I'm going to break all of that down, but I think there's also some vital information that has been data mined from the public test server that sheds a lot of light on what Double 11 is already working on. And if we know what they're already working on, it gives us a pretty good idea of the nature of this relationship, and it has me pretty excited. So looking at the press release itself, that being from Double 11, since Bethesda hasn't actually commented on this at all as far as I can tell, they do say that at Double 11 we've made a word working with some of the biggest developers and publishers in the world. We're excited to be able to announce that we've recently begun working with Bethesda Game Studios to create new challenges for players of Fallout 76. Bethesda and Double 11 began speaking in late 2020, and since then we've worked together on a host of exciting new content that will be enjoyed by this passionate community of fans later in 2022. This press release to me seems like it's worded pretty oddly. They say how they've been working with BGS to create new challenges, and some people took that to literally mean the Fallout 76 season-based challenge system, but that's not the case here. They're talking about just new challenges in general for the game, not literally challenges. They're making new content in general. They also mentioned how they've recently begun working with Bethesda Game Studios, but then also how Bethesda and Double 11 began speaking in late 2020, and since we've worked together on a host of new content. I think this is just worded oddly. I saw a lot of people thinking, okay, so they've been working on the game since late 2020. But no, in reality, at least based off the data mines, it seems like they may have begun work later in 2021, but probably most of the work starting in early 2022. They just worded it in a confusing way, saying that they began speaking in late 2020, and since then, since speaking in late 2020, they've begun work, but work started much later than 2020. And notably, it seems like this is definitely something here to stay for a couple of reasons. They mention how we've loved working on this game so far, and from small beginnings, our team is expanding as we plan to develop more content in the future, so keep an eye on our careers page for more information on open roles across all disciplines. And there are a ton of open positions on this, with one of the notable factors being this is a UK-based studio, giving many people who have otherwise not really had the opportunity to work at Bethesda Game Studios an opportunity to actually work at Bethesda Game Studios. It's the first time they have somebody working on the Fallout IP outside of North America. And considering it seems like they're hinting at the fact, and perhaps even already expanding this team of people at their studio working on Fallout 76, and this negotiation process seemed to span about a year plus, it definitely looks like this is a longer term agreement. I doubt this would have been a year of negotiating to just work on the game for 6 months while Starfield is finished. But on that note, who actually is Double 11? They functionally are a support studio, having worked on a whole host of things, but what seems to be most relevant to Fallout 76 is they are responsible for the console port of Rust. And as of right now, it seems like Fallout 76 and the console port of Rust are the two main things this 150-person studio is concerned with. You might hear console port of Rust and think, okay, so like a one-time job of just porting it over to console, but no, this is actually kind of its own thing in a sense. The console version is not equivalent to the PC version of Rust, and honestly, you could find quite a few threads online criticizing Double 11 for this. How the console version has its own host of issues and even just has way less content than the PC version, or is just not nearly as up to date. But considering Fallout 76 was at one point basically very similar to Rust, at least according to some interviews, you could see how this collaboration does make a lot of sense. Fallout 76 definitely has a connective tissue with Rust, even though in practice the two games are very different if you just look at the features such as building, interaction with other players, and even an online shop to sell skins. These two have a lot in common. But what are they actually working on? In the files of Fallout 76 right now, we could find entries for what Double 11 is likely at least starting with. The most recent PTS update saw several files with a D11 prefix, which has been consistently connected with Nuka World on Tour, that being the final segment of the 2022 roadmap, the content set to come out in winter of this year. As far as what kind of content has been data mined for Nuka World on Tour, we know there's going to be some kind of Nuka Nuka Arcade with tickets to redeem. There's this new region boss with the Ultrasight Abomination. It's going to be a new event with Nuka Launcher, described as a showdown with a wasteland horror at the Nuka Launcher coaster, which will seemingly be at Lake Reynolds in the Ash Heap in-game right now. And finally, there's going to be a Spin the Wheel event, which is introduced by Cappy and Bottle. We're going to spin a wheel 3 times, and depending on what it lands on, you'll get different types of enemies to spawn. You can see there's a whole range of different combinations of enemies that can occur. Spin the wheel, enemies spawn, you defend a couple of objectives, then you spin the wheel again, more enemies that are different, and you can see how this plays out. It has a nice twist of this arcade spin the wheel, but at the end of the day, it's kind of similar to many other events out there, as well as a bunch of objects that are going to be a part of some of these events or others that we don't really know where they're going to fit in yet. So with that in mind, with them having their name tied to a lot of that new content, what I'm starting to think is this is actually going to be more Double 11 helping on Fallout 76. Seems like right now, Bethesda Game Studios Austin, the traditional dev on Fallout 76, are working exclusively or predominantly on expeditions and these 3 new events coming in summer. But really, it seems like most of the work is on expeditions. But the latest release of the public test server, we also found a ton of new details on expeditions. How it'll be based out of the White Springs Resort. You're going to require these charged ultrasight batteries to get to the expeditions, which you'll charge by doing daily quests in Appalachia. Looks like you'll be able to stay in the expeditions after it's completed, and there's even some kind of new currency you'll get from completing it. So rather than having RNG based rewards, perhaps you spend this currency to pick which rewards you want specifically. So when you look at this overall, you have updates to the public test server of both Expeditions and Nuka World on Tour. Nuka World on Tour being associated with this new studio Double 11, Expeditions being associated with Bethesda Game Studios Austin. It almost looks like they're working on these 2 projects in tandem. Rather than one studio supplanting the other's work, it seems like they're just co-developing these 2 separate updates to a degree. And this could actually make a lot of sense when you look at what's been going on with Bethesda Game Studios Austin overall. We saw back in the summer of 2021 how Fallout 76 had its project lead step away from Bethesda Game Studios, someone who's been there for years. And since then, it seems like the new design director may be the person who took over, and that person just recently had an interview where they're talking about a 5-year plan for the game going forward. So it wouldn't shock me if over the past year, there was some internal meetings between Microsoft, Bethesda, and Double 11, but mostly Microsoft and Bethesda, where they're laying out the roadmap for the future. If you somehow forgot, Microsoft just recently bought Bethesda, and with Fallout 76 consistently being one of the most played games on Game Pass, and has pretty much always been in the top 50 played games on Xbox overall, it could definitely make a lot of sense that Microsoft started deciding, hey, maybe we should make some changes here, hire another studio to help develop content for this game going forward. They start laying out longer term plans with a roadmap. There's some administrative changes in who's running this game. And considering Fallout 76 has had a massive, basically several year-long content drought at this point, having more developers gets me very, very excited for the future. This is one of the things I really hoped would happen when Microsoft bought Bethesda. More attention and more content for Fallout 76, especially when you consider this is the only currently monetized, or at least actively monetized, Fallout game that's actually out. Technically, there's Fallout Shelter, but Fallout Shelter isn't getting new content. Fallout 76 still is, and it's the only one still getting new content. At least on the Elder Scrolls side, you have both ESO and Skyrim with Creation Club and Anniversary Edition. And there's even a Fallout TV show coming out in the next couple of years, so that could be another reason to keep this IP going and keep this game active. Although, technically, we really don't know. That's definitely the optimistic perspective on this, but you could look at this from a more pessimistic side also. Maybe this isn't actually any additional developers on Fallout 76. Maybe this is just people getting replaced. Obviously, Bethesda Game Studios is working on Starfield. That is sure to be a massive game. Both Microsoft, Todd Howard, and just Bethesda overall want this to be big and keep talking about it like it's going to be big. Maybe they're pulling developers from Fallout 76 to work on Starfield because they're already very experienced and in their workflow. And now Double 11's being hired to replace those developers that were pulled off of Fallout 76. There's not a net gain here, but things are largely staying the same as far as developer count goes. They're now just outsourcing work on Fallout 76 instead of keeping it in-house. I tend to shy away from that. I definitely think this is just going to be further investment and perhaps even more content for Fallout 76. Maybe both Nuka World on Tour and Expeditions end up being fairly large updates, bigger than some of the past ones, and we get those back to back just a few months apart because they're being worked on by separate teams, or at least somewhat separate teams. Again, we don't really know, but overall, to me, this is definitely something exciting. I think 2023 could end up being a bigger year than many people are expecting, as Double 11 seemingly will be sticking to this game for a while, considering they're literally hiring people for it. I feel like the reason all of this makes sense to me is there's nothing else on the horizon. It doesn't seem like there's any other Fallout game around the corner. Even if those Fallout New Vegas 2 rumors end up being true, it's still 5-6 years away at best. Keeping Fallout 76 active with a constant flow of content in the next several years would make a ton of sense for both Microsoft and Bethesda. Players definitely have an appetite to play more of this game and spend more money on this game. So those are my thoughts. Definitely a very interesting and I think very large development update on Fallout 76. I'd definitely love to hear from you guys down below. What do you think about this? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I think right now you could really look at it either way. It's hard to tell definitively, but I think some of those data mines and the fact that we have evidence of them working on Nuka World on tour, which still isn't slated to come out for 6, 7, 8 months from now, does get me at least somewhat hopeful that this is a good thing. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you guys all next time. Later.